Oxford. The year is 2002. In the behavioural ecology laboratory, a crow named Betty is inside her cage, looking at a transparent tube. At the bottom of the tube is a piece of meat. Lying nearby is a straight piece of wire. What happens next will take less than a minute. But this moment will compel scientists to rewrite chapters in cognitive biology textbooks. Betty takes the wire in her beak. She inserts one end through the bars of her cage and begins to bend it. Methodically, purposefully. She fashions a hook on her first try, then she lowers it into the tube, hooks the piece of meat and lifts it out. The researchers are stunned. This bird has just done something that was not part of the experimental protocol. No one had taught her to bend the wire. She had not seen other crows do it. She spontaneously invented a tool, solving an engineering problem in real time. Until that moment, tool making was considered a hallmark of human intelligence. Chimpanzees learn this over years, through observation and error. But here, a bird with a brain the size of a walnut, 7.5 grams of neural tissue versus the 1,400 grams in a human, solves the problem intuitively. The question no one dares to ask aloud is this: what if everything we thought we knew about intelligence was just the story of how our brain works, and not about intelligence in general? He repeated the trick 9 out of 10 times. Then other experiments began. Each one systematically dismantled another uniquely human criterion for intelligence. But before we can understand how this is possible, we must grasp the scale of the problem. Because a crow's brain is not just a scaled-down version of a primate brain, it's another planet. Birds do not have a neocortex. Read that again. Crows, parrots, and all other birds lack the very 6-layered cerebral cortex that neuroscience has considered the biological foundation of thought for 150 years. The structure through which we explained memory, planning, abstraction, and self-awareness. The foundation of reason. It simply isn't there. It's like discovering a skyscraper built without a foundation, or a computer running without a processor, an impossible architecture that, by all the laws we had established, should not be able to function. Instead of a neocortex, crows evolved a pallium. This structure has a vertical organization, with neurons arranged in columns rather than the horizontal layers found in our brains. German neurobiologist Onur Güntürk'n calls this the convergent evolution of intelligence. Nature, twice and completely independently, invented higher cognitive functions, through different paths, with different tools. But here's the paradox that shatters intuition completely. A crow's forebrain contains up to 1.5 billion neurons per cubic centimetre. That is twice as dense as a primate's. Twice. A crow's brain is not a smaller version of ours. It is a hyper-compressed supercomputer packed into the volume of a walnut. Consider the ratio of forebrain mass to body mass. For corvids, it is 1 to 39. For dolphins, 1 to 50. For humans, 1 to 35. Crows hold the second highest position on the planet by this measure. A skeptic might say, fine, the neuron density is impressive, but that's not proof of intelligence. Perhaps these neurons are just for managing flight, navigation, or vision, a fair objection. That is why scientists designed experiments to isolate pure cognitive function, tests that do not require physical strength, are independent of sensory organs, and are unrelated to survival instincts. Abstract puzzles, logical problems, future planning. Here is what the results showed. Crows don't just solve problems. They solve problems that require an understanding of abstractions beyond the reach of most mammals on this planet, including those we are accustomed to considering intelligent. A narrow glass tube, water at the bottom, a floating treat on the surface too deep to reach with a beak. A crow looks at the tube, it looks around, it finds a stone, it drops it in. The water level rises, not enough. The crow drops a second stone, a third, a fourth. The water rises, the treat is now within reach. This is Aesop's fable, an ancient story that for 2,000 years was thought to be fiction. But crows solve it in the lab, methodically, purposefully. A skeptic might say instinct, a random behavior reinforced by evolution. So the scientists made the experiment more complex. 2 tubes are placed before the crow, one contains water, the other sand. Both options look identical. The crow chooses the tube with water. It ignores the sand. A new test. Heavy and light stones are placed nearby. The crow chooses the heavy ones because they raise the water level faster. This isn't a reflex. It's an understanding of cause and effect, an understanding of the properties of matter. Liquids are displaced by solids. Density matters. Physics. The bird understands physics, but it gets stranger. The year is 2015, a study by Ditz and Nieder. Crows are shown a screen with dots. Sometimes there are 3 dots, sometimes 1, sometimes nothing. A blank screen. The birds learn to distinguish quantities. 1, 2, 3, and 0. 0 is not just the absence of something, it is an abstract mathematical concept. The idea that nothing can be counted as a number. Most animals do not operate with this concept. Many human cultures historically had no concept of 0. Crows perform this task at the level of rhesus monkeys. Abstract mathematics. In a bird with a brain the size of a walnut. The next experiment planning for the future. A crow is in room A. In front of it are a tool and some food. It can eat the food now or take the tool. If it takes the tool, it will be moved to room B 17 hours later. In room B, there will be inaccessible food that can only be retrieved with that tool. 17 hours is an eternity for an animal with a bird's metabolism. The crows choose the tool, they wait, they use it the next day. This is a mental time machine, the ability to simulate a future event that does not yet exist. To suppress an immediate desire for a delayed reward or sin. This ability was once attributed only to humans and great apes. But there is another level. New Caledonian crows make 9 different types of tools. Hooks, barbed sticks, spears. They are not born with this knowledge. They learn it by observing their parents and their peers. This is cultural transmission of knowledge. Not genetic, but social. In the city of Sendai, Japan, urban crows place walnuts on crosswalks. They wait for the red light. Cars run over the nuts. When the light turns green, the crows descend to collect the contents. This behavior is 30 years old. It spreads horizontally from bird to bird. It is culture. And here science confronts an uncomfortable question. If intelligence is not brain size, not its structure, not its evolutionary proximity to humans, then what is it? For 150 years, neuroscience was built on a single axiom. Intelligence is the neocortex, the 6-layered cerebral cortex. The larger and more complex it is, the smarter the creature. A chimpanzee is smarter than a dog. A human is smarter than a chimpanzee. A simple hierarchy. Then Betty came along and bent a wire, and scientists opened their experiment files and began to cross off the criteria one by one. Toolmaking? Crossed off. Crows make 9 types and spontaneously invent new ones. Future planning? Crossed off. 17 hours of waiting for a delayed reward. Understanding abstract numbers? Crossed off. The concept of 0, on par with rhesus monkeys. Metacognition? Crossed off. In 2017, a study by Brecht showed that crows assess their own confidence in their decisions. They opt out of tasks when they are uncertain. This is self-analysis. Thinking about thinking. Facial recognition and long-term memory? Crossed off. An experiment in Seattle. Researchers wore masks, captured crows and released them. The birds remembered the masks. They passed this information to their offspring who had never witnessed the original event. A cultural memory of a threat passed down for generations. What's left? Language. But crow communication contains syntactic elements. The order of sounds changes the meaning. These are not just alarm calls. Bum. They are structured transmissions of information. You might say, perhaps we are anthropomorphizing. Projecting human qualities onto birds? No. The experiments are designed with double-blind controls. Crows solve problems that dogs cannot. Cats cannot. Most primates cannot. These are measurable, reproducible results. And so neuroscience takes a step back and rewrites the definition. Intelligence is not a substrate, not the neocortex, not the pallium, not size, not evolutionary proximity to Homo sapiens. Intelligence is the computational ability of a system to solve novel problems by modeling reality, and nature invented it twice. 300 million years ago, birds and mammals diverged from a common ancestor. 2 branches of evolution, 2 independent paths. Mammals built horizontal layers, the neocortex. Birds built vertical columns, the pallium. Different architecture, same result. We are not unique. We are one of a kind. But if crows are so intelligent, why didn't they build a civilization? Why doesn't intelligence guarantee dominance? And what does that say about us? Because intelligence is a necessary condition, but it is not sufficient. The crow has no hands. Does that sound trivial? Then imagine this. You understand how a lever works. You see that a rock can be used as a hammer. You know a stick can become a spear. But your manipulators are a beak and talons, optimized for gripping branches, not for precise work, holding fire, or writing. Crows make tools, but they cannot make tools to make tools. Without an opposable thumb, there is no leverage for a technological civilization. The crow has no time. Its lifespan is 10 to 15 years. A human lives for 70, 80, 100. We have a childhood that lasts 20 years to accumulate culture. A crow has 2 years until sexual maturity. It learns quickly, but its cultural baggage is passed on in fragments. Knowledge accumulates slowly. Progress is hindered by biology. The crow lacks a vocal apparatus. They communicate, yes. Their calls contain syntactic elements. But human language is not just sounds. It is a larynx that has descended into the throat. It is fine control over airflow. It is thousands of phonemes combining into infinite combinations of abstractions. Crows can warn of a predator, but they cannot discuss the philosophy of death. And the cruelest limitation, the crow lacks the energy reserves. Its brain consumes 20% of its body's energy, just like ours. But a human walks on the ground, a crow must fly. Every gram is critical. Neuron density is already at its limit, 1.5 billion nigon per cubic centimetre. Any more is impossible, because a bigger brain means more weight, and more weight means death in the air. The crow is balanced on the knife's edge of an evolutionary compromise. It is impossible to be smarter without losing the sky. We sacrificed powerful jaws, claws, speed. We became physically weak, but we gained a large brain. The crow sacrificed brain size and gained wings, different bets, different winnings. And here is the lesson. Intelligence does not automatically make a species dominant. Humans rule the planet not because we are the smartest. Crows outperform us on some tests. We rule because we have a unique combination: intelligence plus hands plus language plus social structure plus a long life. Remove one element, and Homo sapiens is just another clever primate sitting on the savannah, cracking nuts with stones, and never building the pyramids. Crows are intelligent, but they are trapped in a body optimized for a different task. This leads us to the most uncomfortable conclusion of all, because if intelligence can arise twice independently on one planet, then the probability of it arising elsewhere is no longer science fiction. 300 million years ago, birds and mammals diverged from a common ancestor, some ancient reptile whose name is lost to the paleontological record. 2 branches of evolution, 2 completely different paths, and both arrived at the same solution. Reason. They just took different routes: horizontal layers versus vertical columns, neocortex versus pallium, large volume versus hyperdense packing. This is not a coincidence. It is proof intelligence is a stable evolutionary solution. Life arrives at it again and again when there is selective pressure, when the environment demands modelling reality, predicting the future, and solving novel problems. And if it happened twice on one planet, what's to stop it from happening on millions of others? We have searched for intelligent life in the universe, looking for humanoids, with large heads, with hands, with technologies similar to our own. But the crow shows us that intelligence can hide in the most unexpected forms, in a bird the size of a pigeon, in a brain weighing 7.5 grams, in a creature we considered for thousands of years to be just a bird. Let's go back to Betty. Oxford, 2002. The wire, the hook, the first try. She didn't just solve a puzzle, she held up a mirror to us, and in that mirror, we saw not human uniqueness, but the variability of intelligence. We understood that intelligence is not a privilege of primates with oversized skulls. It is a property of complex systems, one that can arise in a vast array of configurations. The pallium works, the neocortex works, perhaps there is a third way, a fourth, a fifth, we just didn't know where to look. Because we were viewing the world through the lens of anthropocentrism, we measured intelligence with a ruler calibrated to ourselves, and anything that didn't fit our criteria, we dismissed as instinct. Betty broke that ruler, and now the question is not whether we are unique. The question is, how many other forms of intelligence are we overlooking on this planet, in the oceans, beneath the ground, in the clouds of Venus, on the Arctic moons of Jupiter? How many times has evolution invented intelligence, and we walked right past it because it didn't look like our own? The next time you see a crow on the street, stop, look it in the eye, and ask yourself, what is it thinking about me? Because now we know it is thinking, assessing, remembering, planning, and perhaps it looks at us the same way we once looked at it, as a curious but limited creature, one that for far too long considered itself the only intelligent species on the planet.